So hello everybody and welcome to a special one-off impromptu show that myself and Kelley are doing today about one of the very special objects. It's not a KBO, it's not an asteroid, but it's a centaur that is flying around in a very interesting, even eccentric as described, orbit around planet Earth. Now that is the asteroid known as 944, otherwise known as Hidalgo. So today, myself and my wonderful friend, my co-host from Moons and Mythos, astrologer and mythologist Kelley Hunter, we're going to be doing a deep dive on asteroid 944. Kelley, how are you doing? Wonderful to have you here.
I'm good. Remember our last Moons and Mythos, you threw that curveball to me and I caught it, and this is it. This is Hidalgo, and yeah, we're on it.
Right, and so there are many interesting things that hopefully we're going to be able to unfold and unravel about the story of Hidalgo, and why now has this avatar being, really, which is how I'm understanding it from my own connection across time and space with the being that was Hidalgo. What was his message and why is it important right now? Because it's very much tied in with the energy of now, with the nodes, with what's going on in the US, about independence, about sovereignty, and most of all, about a new way of being, which is what Hidalgo stood for.
And not only US, but
there's
Mexico.
A lot to get into this show. We've already been talking for an hour before we even jumped on about what to include and what not. We've got paper flying everywhere. We've got astro charts coming out of every screen around us possible. We've completely confused the hell out of ourselves, and most of all, we're having a lot of fun. Which is really what this is going to be about. So we want to share what we've discovered about this asteroid and many interesting loops that seem to place a very important focus on the present moment and about breaking down time. And we were talking also, our friend, a fellow astrologer, Pam Gregory, did an amazing piece with Magenta Pixie in the last few days, also showing some of the energy of what's going on in this moment. We are breaking down time and space into one very long extended understanding of the present moment, which, thanks to our good old buddy Dandelion over the last year or so, has given many of us the opportunity to understand that time is a very fluid, non-linear actually experience, and it just depends how we put our attention into the present moment and on what. And with a quantum mind, that creates the observer and the observed effect. So in some ways, we're opening a portal right now through doing this and putting our attention and intention into what this story is all about. So we have a lot to get through, and I'm going to start this piece and then I'm going to pass it over to Kelley to share her version of how this happened too. But my own story with Hidalgo begins here in Mexico when I first arrived back in October of 2021. The very first place that I arrived into and stayed actually on the ranch where I did some of the videos back with Pam, including the winter solstice one on 2021, was in the state of Hidalgo, which has as its capital city, the city of Pachuca, which I had a very strong interest in for many years, primarily because some of my own ancestors from Cornwall founded the city along with a bunch of other immigrants who went to the state of what is now Hidalgo looking for silver and other things to mine. And of course, Cornwall has a very strong tradition in mining with the tin, and also a very magical, esoteric, witchy kind of a place, Cornwall too. But as a consequence of all of this, and it seems strange to some people, I started following the Pachuca football team, who used to play in black and white, which is the color of the Cornish flag. So this is how my interest in Pachuca started many years ago. I even sent my younger sister, when she came here on a holiday, to Pachuca to pick me up a scarf from my football scarf collection. That's how sad I am. But what's interesting is when the opportunity came up to get my residency here in Mexico, I had several options and one of them was in Pachuca. So I actually got my green card in Pachuca on that incredible conjunction we had on April the 12th last year. So I'm also just coming over my first year as an official resident here in Mexico, but it was in the city of Pachuca, and the city stadium is named the Hidalgo Stadium. So this is how this piece started for me, and I'm going to unravel the rest of the story as we go along. But Hidalgo, the asteroid, or as it turns out, the centaur, has been in my awareness for a while, but never really wanting to manifest until a series of synchronistic events happened last week through the Jupiter Cazimi that happened on April the 11th around 22 degrees of Aries, which is when I threw the curveball to Kelley.
Just let people know what that is. It's a Jupiter-Sun conjunction, in case you don't know.
Conjunction,
Yeah.
exactly. So at which point I sent Kelley some very excited messages last week saying, oh, we have to do a piece on Hidalgo and we need to do it like immediately, full of the energy of the Cazimi and a bunch of other things that happened spiritually. I did throw Kelley a curveball, which hopefully she did catch, I think, very, very well, and is now going to throw back in this episode. And hopefully we'll be able to hold the two ends of this curveball energy. So that's my little intro into Hidalgo. So I'm going to pass over to Kelley, who of course is the astrologer here on the show. I'm just making up the numbers really and adding some decoration with the trees. So what can you tell us from your perspective about your connections with this very interesting object that circles our planet?
Well, when you mentioned it, it was a familiar name because I'd done some work on it years ago. I don't even remember when. But when I had to catch that ball and I said, okay, what's my connection to Hidalgo? And so I looked it up and I knew this, but I forgot it. I forget things. Anyway, Hidalgo is conjunct my south node at 1314 Libra. And I've been having, and that means my north node is at 1314 Aries, and Chiron has been circling that. It just basically finished in the last few weeks, and Jupiter went across it as well. So that would have been opposite the Hidalgo energy. And I also found out I have some astrocartography lines through Mexico that relate. So basically it's on my south node. Like I know that, right? That's like a given, that's impressions from the past. So that's what, certainly caught my interest. I said, yeah, this is really relevant information for me. So I looked it up as an astronomical object, and it is really interesting. It was discovered in 1920 by a German astrologer. And the chart is interesting, and we'll be looking at that in a bit. And the thing is, 3 years later, there was a total eclipse in Mexico, and a team of German astrologers went over. They got an audience with the president to ask if they could name that object that they had discovered for Hidalgo. So that's how it got its name on that visit for the total eclipse in September of 1923. So number one, we're having a 100-year anniversary of that coming up, which Davyd mentioned to me earlier. So that's one of these things, So the other thing is that when it was discovered at that point, in 1920, that was before Pluto was discovered, and well before Chiron was discovered. So when they discovered it, they called it an asteroid. But it goes quite far out. It as one of the astronomers said, it grazes the orbit of Saturn. And it at that point was the farthest astronomical object discovered as of 1920. And there wasn't a category for centaurs at that point. So they were calling it an asteroid. But it became a centaur once Chiron was discovered, and they said, okay, we need a new category. So Hidalgo is definitely a centaur because it comes to the close side of the asteroid belt. So it goes through the asteroid belt. It comes to the front edge of the asteroid belt, closest to Mars. But then it goes through the asteroid belt, out past Jupiter, and touches right at the edge of the realm of Saturn. So it goes from the asteroid belt out to Saturn. So that's what orbits of centaurs do. They cross the orbits of other planets. And this is a highly elliptical. I mean, that's quite a distance out and quite a close distance in. So the orbit is highly elliptical, and it is such an odd one that it will spend over 3 years in the signs of Scorpio and Sagittarius. And then it's coming closer and closer. And by the time it gets to Gemini at its closest, perihelion, it's going through a sign in 42 days. So
Wow.
that's a big difference, 3+ years to 42 days. So that is very unusual movement and makes this one of the most exciting, astronomical objects, for those reasons.
Right. So in this opening salvo, there's already a number of drops and deltas, as anyone who follows those channels will understand, about what we're looking at here. And the first one that you mentioned, so we're going to have to take this piece by piece, because every time we look more into the details, more interesting information emerges. So the first one I want to focus on is the nodal aspect. And this is really how I got interested in the asteroid Hidalgo. So Hidalgo is named after a famous, you could say, revolutionary warrior priest, Miguel Hidalgo y Costillo, or Costillo. He was from Mexico, of course, and he led the charge for the independence of Mexico, which we'll talk a little bit more about as this sort of story unfolds. But what was interesting for me was when I pulled up his chart, I immediately realized that his north node and mine were pretty much exactly the same. And I'm currently going through a nodal reversal return. So Pluto squaring the nodes is also squaring my own nodes being reversed. So his nodes are exactly the same as mine. So that was the first loop on time that I got, and how we were accessing information coming from the nodes, which again is a little bit like hidden portals, right, through which information can come. And so Pluto being at the extremity of all of this is actually showing us like how we can start to communicate across time and space through astrology. So I think that's super interesting. The next piece I want to...
Davyd, it also relates to your ancestral connection, the nodes.
Right. And what I also think is really interesting for me in this moment of having a nodal reversal return the way I've been experiencing, is a complete reevaluation of life, myself and everything. But also it feels like time has compressed. And this is where I think the video that Pam and Magenta just did is really interesting and totally concurs with the last 2 weeks of my life, is that time is compressed into one now moment. We are in the still point, the event horizon, all sense of time and space is collapsing. Now, if we're not prepared for that, it could seem very disorientating. And anyone who's still watching the illusion box is probably going to start to feel very, very disorientated by the information that is now starting to flood out. One of the interesting things that happened to me during the last 2 weeks, being very tuned into the astral planes, is that I saw the complete edifice of the structure collapse, fully collapse in the astral planes. Incredible. It hasn't quite filtered through into 3D yet, because there's still some level of resistance from some of humanity from wanting to see what actually the edifice is. The edifice is everything that is the matrix, is everything that we see on television. So why is this piece of information important? Because in this moment of collapse, we need to understand that we are much more than these beings that we have an idea about. We are eternal beings, avatars. We are all avatars projecting in to this 3D reality to experience something. And once we remember that, we understand that we're actually the ones in charge of this simulation and not whoever the other people are. And that's maybe a podcast for another time. So I feel that a lot of what we're looking at here with the Pluto squaring the nodes is about the collapsing of time into the understanding that the only thing that really exists is the present moment. And what goes on in that present moment depends on where our attention and intention is going, which I think is why Hidalgo wants to come through now. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the plants that I think are connected to this being, but Miguel Hidalgo really rode out under the banner of Our Lady of Guadalupe, who's another personification, although slightly inverted, I feel, from the church, of the goddess. So this is a man who was a priest who wanted to make a world where everybody was equal, with no injustice. Didn't matter whether he was born to a Spanish family, but he had a very strong relationship with all of the indigenous tribes of Central and Northern Mexico, which is how he was able to raise the banner of the goddess, appeal across the Spanish and indigenous divide, and raise an army that wanted to overthrow what was then a land ruled by still the Spanish Empire. And so that was really his mission. And he rode out under the cry of Dolores. And Dolores Hidalgo is a place very close to San Miguel de Allende, which is a town in the center of Mexico that has a very strong spiritual energy, or has had, and that's a story for another time too. But it's a place that's very much carrying the energy of crystalline beings. There's a lot of crystal found in the area, and the main cathedral is in honor of the great man himself, Archangel Michael, or San Miguel, or Archangel Michael, as some people will call him. So this is a man who rode under the banner of the goddess on the feminine side, but with the energy of Miguel, of Archangel Michael on the masculine side. And that's how he was able to balance the energies of the masculine and the feminine in him as a warrior priest, who was able to then reach out across the divides and gather an army that in the end did actually lead to the overthrow of the Spanish Empire. And he is rightly known as the father or grandfather of Mexican independence because of this, even though he didn't see out the end of his mission, because he met an unfortunate end, which we'll get to later in the story. And the story was carried on by his lieutenant Allende, but who also met an untimely end and then was finished with Morelos, another priest. So this is a story of spiritual men called to arms to take up the battle between light and dark in a moment when it felt like the darkness maybe was about to consume the world again. And maybe it did, because in the moment that Hidalgo met his untimely end, there was a moment where America's history could also have changed at the hands of the governor in San Antonio in Texas. And of course, Texas has an energy of independence, the free state, the Lone Star State. So this is an energy that's coming through to us now that's reminding us about the importance of sovereignty in oneself through balancing of masculine, feminine energies so that independence can come. So this is really what, as you can probably imagine, what got me excited about this guy. It's like, wow, he's one of my kind of guys, man. He's a guy that is obviously spiritual, but has the energy of a warrior, a commander in the moment that it was needed. He wasn't a general. He wasn't part of an army. So isn't that fascinating that this energy is coming through? And I think it's coming through the eclipses, because the eclipses, I believe, are portals through which information can be sent and received into the future as we perceive it, or even from the past as we perceive it.
Well, I think you're so right, because, we have an eclipse season. We're in the middle of eclipse season now, but we're going to have another one in October. And there's a partial eclipse on October 28th.
My birthday.
Is relevant to the charts we're going to look at. And it's at 5 degrees of Taurus, which is right on Hidalgo's nodes. So, and yours may be too, Davyd. I forget what numbers you have there.
3 degrees of Taurus. So one other thing I just want to allude to. So the planet the asteroid 944, the now Centaur Hidalgo, was found by the German astronomer or scientist Walter Bard on October the 31st, Halloween, 1920. At 16 degrees of Aries. So this is also looping back to the full moon Libra that we just had.
So you're saying that the Hidalgo itself was placed at 16 degrees when it was discovered.
That's what I'm understanding. Yes.
Yes, that's what I've got. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So isn't this interesting? And the other thing that's really fascinating about the sign, about this asteroid, as you said, or the Centaur, is that it spends 50% of its elliptical orbit in 2 signs, in Scorpio and Sagittarius. So 50% of people, in theory, should be born with Hidalgo in one of those 2 signs. And it's currently up in Scorpio at the moment at 25 degrees. So maybe we'll have a little look at how that's playing into the charts of the moment in a while. So again, we've got this 16 degrees of Aries popping up, which is an important one, and 16 degrees of Libra, which is where, as you said, you have a connection from your natal chart, and where I also have my own Pluto at 14 degrees. So there's many personal aspects to this, which I think probably are going to emerge, not just for us, but anyone who looks at this chart is going to understand more about their connection, and probably why they're still in the game, in the soup, creating the space for new Earth to be formed. And that's, I think, something really exciting. So where should we start on the story? Maybe we can, maybe I'm just going to pull up my notes and just give some more details about the man himself.
So do you want to look at the charts?
Yeah, so as you're, let's pull up the chart for the first one. In fact, let's pull up the chart of the man himself, and we'll just talk through his life, and then we'll bring it into how the asteroid was found. So if you want to do that, Kelley, I'm going to just bring up the nuts and bolts. So he was born Miguel Hidalgo y Costillo.
Now let me have screen share, please.
Oh, sorry, did I not do that already?
Oh, maybe. Anyway, it looks like I have it now. So,
you're on.
Okay, good. Okay.
So perfect. I'll let you just pull that up.
Okay, I want that to be bigger. What happened here?
No worries. So you just pull it up. Well, and meanwhile, I'm just going to continue talking about Hidalgo here. So he was born on May the 8th, 1753 in Coaleco near Guanajuato in Mexico, and died on July the 30th in 1811 in Chihuahua. He was a Roman Catholic priest and revolutionary leader, and is rightly called the father of Mexican independence. He studied at the Jesuit secondary school, received a bachelor's degree in theology and philosophy in 1773 from the San Nicolas College, now the Michoacan University of San Nicolas de Hidalgo, in the city that is now called Morelia, but at the time was called Valladolid, after the city in Spain, of course. He was ordained a priest in 1778, but in 1803, after a fairly uneventful early career, he assumed his recently deceased elder brother's duties as the parish priest in Dolores, now named Dolores Hidalgo in the state of Guanajuato. A very important part of the story too. So he becomes involved in politics through the economic advancement of his parishioners, and understanding that newer methods of agriculture and the political oppression of the Spanish authorities led him to somewhat suspect their motives, and also that of the church, I believe. So this is how he got involved in the situation, and what led him to ring the bells, the cry of Dolores, which we're going to look at that too, because that's really the birth moment, that the idea for Mexican independence as a free state.
It's like the Declaration of Independence in the US.
Right.
And the timing is close too. Yeah.
So we're going to have a look at those charts in a bit. We're probably going to confuse ourselves and everybody else otherwise, but let's look at the man himself and look at his chart, because that's where the fascination starts, with the loops that then come to when the asteroid is found and when it's named, all of which are very astrologically interesting. So talk us through this, Kelley. Talk us about what emerges from this chart for you.
Well, he is a Taurus, and the sun is very close to the south node, so we know he was born near an eclipse. And in fact, and we're not sure of the time, so we don't know if the moon is in Cancer or Leo. In any case, it's square the Neptune in Leo, which squares the nodes. That makes it a very important, his spirituality, and that almost like that makes him the warrior priest. You know, that is a leadership role that is part of his destiny. So if we backtrack the moon, say about 5 days, there would have been a total solar eclipse, I believe. And Mercury is retrograde, so Mercury is on that eclipse. Could have been a partial, didn't look that up. It had so much to look at. Right? That is very important. And yes, this is where the nodes are now, reversed. And another thing I find really interesting about the chart is, so if we put Pluto's position in, it's going to be at 0 Aquarius. So it is bringing him back into our collective destiny. And his Neptune is part of that revelation, in a sense, that he expressed and brought in as part of his destiny. And the placement of 944 Hidalgo when he was born was at 27 Aquarius, which conjuncts his Pallas Athena, another asteroid representing contribution to civilization, the objective wisdom of Pallas Athena, and her strategic knowledge, intelligence. And she just keeps coming through these charts as well. We don't want to put overemphasis on it, but you'll see it pop up. And then there's this beautiful, now Uranus was in Pisces then with his Mars, so he's a revolutionary. And Ceres is there, a dwarf planet that we find in the asteroid belt. And that also follows through several of these charts. And she is the goddess who is about the well-being of all on Earth. She's about the well-being of the people and the animals and everything. That is her umbrella of the common good and what's in the welfare of the people and the land. So I think that's an important aspect of his being born in Mexico and first generation and feeling that connection to the land and the people. And then we have this Pluto in Sagittarius with Eris, the rabble rouser, and Chiron, the teacher healer. So that is all in there true. You know, he stands for the truth. He is compelled. And that is a beautiful conjunction, I think. I really like that. Pluto-Chiron conjunctions don't happen very often. The last one we had was in 1999 in Sagittarius. And the one before that was in 1942-ish in early Leo. So I think he's been called up for a while here, but that new millennium passage and conjunction of Pluto and Chiron was repeated at this point that we see in his chart. So any comments you want to make on this?
Yeah, so again, we have the energy of the revolutionary, the energy of, in many ways, the warrior, but also the shaman. I think whenever you have Pluto and Chiron working together, you have the energy of the wounded healer, but also with the maximum sort of higher notes of Scorpio, which is a very shamanic sign anyway, death and rebirth.
Yes, and the collective transformation of consciousness that's going on then. Yes.
Right, but he's got it all going on in Sagittarius, which is obviously a very spiritual sign of higher ideals and philosophies and practices. And so he's a man of the cloth. He enters the church, I believe, as a spiritual person, probably very connected to God, very connected to the angelic realms. He, for me, has a very, very strong energy of Archangel Michael in his persona, in the way that I've been able to connect with him. But he's also got Chiron here and Pluto and in Sagittarius. So it's like, you know, he's a man who can see the truth. He can see the truth of the wounding even of humanity, but also he knew magic. I mean, I can tell from the way he lived his life, the moves that he made, everything about him is a man that behind the scenes was a magician, masquerading with the avatar of a warrior priest. You know, I think what I've learned from him is really about sometimes we present ourselves in the world with an outfit, and his was as a priest, but actually he had the heart of a warrior, and inside of him he was a magician. You know, his whole inner world really, when we ran the chart, we actually came up with him being Taurus ascendant and Scorpio descendant, which actually made a lot of sense.
Born around dawn, that would be so.
So who knows exactly, we don't have the time, but when I connected into the energy of him, again working with some of my own plant medicines, I was able to understand that his inner world was very Scorpio, and so it kind of made a lot of sense. So we don't know for sure, but his energy that came through to me was very much of a magician, but also of a shaman, a warrior healer. And so ideally the kind of person you would need who understands that duality is a process. And probably by the time you've been 10 years in the Catholic Church, you'd already seen enough to understand exactly in his world where the inversion was coming from, which I think is super important considering the revelations that have just come in the modern world about the Dalai Lama and all of the terrible stuff that's come out of that revelation. I don't think anyone out there really still believes the Pope's a good guy or that the Catholic Church is some edifice of spiritual uplift. The Christ consciousness, on the other hand, is a very, very different story. And I think that that's where the inversion that we have been living through over the last 2,000 years is about to collapse. And maybe that's why Hidalgo is also pointing towards this. It's like, this is the collapse of everything that spurred him to fight in the first place, which was probably the inversion of spirituality through the dark practices of the Catholic Church, which have had a very detrimental effect everywhere in Latin America.
Well, his compassion with these planets in Pisces also would be, you know, that truth of what's going on in the church and you know, part of the I've got to take it down thing. And I would not be at all surprised if he was born like in the morning. I think it's very likely his moon, it was in Cancer and was opposite the black moon Lilith. I think that's very likely. So I think his other position of black moon is in early Aquarius. But in any case, this is a no fooling around black moon.
Right.
And I dare say that devotion was part of having the moon in Cancer as well. That's my best guess.
Right. So these are the interesting sort of opening salvos, shall we say, of looking through these loops here. So is there anything you wish to add into this mix? Then maybe we'll bring back this chart as a story.
Well, we're going to look at the charts of 944 Hidalgo. That's its astronomical number, and we're going to look at it in relation to this chart. So we'll have another look.
Okay, so let's move on to the moment that it was discovered, because there's also an interesting loop that seems to fit with eclipses and nodes. So I think that's really the teaching, and from an astrological point of view, that Hidalgo wants to point us towards right now is understand what eclipses actually are and how to work with them for your own benefit and the benefit of humanity. And once we've got that down,
look at this. You know, it's got that same polarity. And the eclipse is almost the same degree as his birth. This is, of course, they're going to name it Hidalgo.
So chicken and egg situation. Were these guys really, really plugged in, or did it all just fit from a quantum space because they put their attention to it and then somehow it's all retrofitted? Because this is the great piece that we're in now, is that we have moved into a quantum world and we have to get our heads around what that is. Observer and the observed. Was it there before we looked? Who the hell knows? Did the tree in the forest fall, even if we saw it or not? Who the hell knows? Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But once we put attention to it, we see it.
Did the astronomers know about Hidalgo? Did they, anyway, I do think astronomers must be channeling something. They must be getting downloads, even if they don't know it. So this is pretty astounding.
To talk it through it, let's start with the nodes. Come on, because that seems like an interesting place to start.
Yes. So there is the sun conjunct the north node, which means this is really close to an eclipse point. So when we look at the moon at the end of Gemini there and we backtrack it, yes, we're backtracking. This would have been, 2 days total lunar eclipse. So that's pretty amazing right there. 2 or 3 days, maybe 4. But a total lunar eclipse. So that is
the portal of the eclipse energy, right?
Yeah. If the sun or moon are near, if the sun is near an eclipse point, north or south, there's an eclipse in the range here. So there we are. And so that's pretty powerful. And that's getting activated. That's getting activated. Again, the reverse eclipse. So there's that. Now, we also have Uranus in Pisces again, like Miguel had, and it's squaring the eclipse. So the Uranus is really important here and points to how maybe unusual an object it is, but also that it is related to the revolution that Miguel Hidalgo was part of.
Mm-hmm. Right. And also the energy of Uranus is very maverick, very unexpected, something out of nothing, that a revolution can be sparked instantly if the energy comes. But again, we've got this situation with the node. So the discovery of 944 was also when the north nodes are in this position that they currently are in, that I was born with, that Hidalgo also was born with. So what's going on with this? And also, we also have Pluto still in aspect again, right, to the nodes.
Pluto.
Different, not a square, but a different kind
Pluto.
of
It's in a trine and it's in a sextile, close, but the square is with Uranus. And it's the same sign that Miguel Hidalgo had in his chart, and so is Neptune. Neptune's come back around as well, because this is about 160 something years later. I don't know. Did I do the math on that? Anyway, 2 Uranus cycles and 1 Neptune cycle, I think. So anyway, this is pretty relevant. This is pretty resonant. And then we've got a Jupiter Saturn coming together, which is a new 20-year cycle. And, keep that in mind, the Virgo connections here. So what else? We have this a little stellium in Sagittarius, black moon right connecting to Hidalgo's chart. There's the black moon, Black Madonna energy again, the Virgin of Guadalupe energy. And the moon is opposite. Well, we don't know if the moon is in Gemini or Cancer, actually. Maybe it is in Cancer, and that would match nicely, but we don't know. So, and then look at the Aries energy. There's Pallas Athena coming through, conjunct the asteroid position in its birth chart, which we just had Chiron across this. We had the Jupiter Cazimi on that. We have Chiron in Aries. So this is like really lined up. This is the magic of these loops, as you're calling them, how timelines reconnect, how we layer our experience through time, or in the timelessness, we might say.
Yes.
I also like this chart because it has a water trine and an earth triangle. And that these are both the feminine elements. So I just think it's a 6-pointed, no, it isn't. It is not a 6-pointed star, but it's a beautiful, trines. So, or is it?
It is a 6-pointed star, isn't it, Kelley?
No, this would be a sextile.
No,
wait, I'm having trouble thinking.
It's been a tough week. Thinking is now a very new experience, shall we say, and I feel like many of us are experiencing the difficulty in thinking in 3D. Well, certainly for me, it's become very, very fluid in the higher mind space over the last 2 weeks. And, I also just want to bring in another interesting aspect. The last Mayan wave spell that we were working through, which finished on the 21st. Yesterday was also Earth Day. The 22nd of April was Earth Day. It was also Yggdrasil Day, which is the day of the ewe, and was also the beginning of a new wave spell, which is the magnetic storm. The last wave spell was the world bridges. So in Mayan cosmology, in Mayan energy, we were working with the energy of bridging worlds. And who pops into this mix? This time-traveling warrior priest, Hidalgo, pointing to all of these ways of looping through time according to where we put our attention. And if we are in our higher mind space, we can do that using quantum energy instantly. It's a kind of a form of telepathy, hence how Hidalgo was able to reach out and communicate with me and Bella over the last week and communicate this information that we're trying to share as best we can, because it's quantum, through the charts and the history. Mind-blowing.
Yeah. The black moon is right on my sun sign, so I definitely have a special vibe with this.
So let's just review it a second, because I know there's a lot to take in here, and even we're getting confused sharing the information. But the key points are that the nodes are looping. We're having eclipses popping up in various spaces either side of all of this important information. And if we now loop 3 years into the future, into 1923, and pull up the chart of when this then asteroid Centaur was named, we're also going to see some other loops, right?
Yeah, I would like to just do this one quickly.
Sure.
Which shows the overlay.
Wow.
Which is going to summarize, so
talk us through this one. There's a lot on this chart. So
well, it's basically what we've just said. Okay. The eclipses are like a return, eclipse return. He's having a nodal return on this, when this thing was discovered. We have the two outer planets, Neptune in Leo and Uranus in Pisces, same sign. And then we're looking at the Pisces, the connection between this powerful Chiron-Pluto conjunction in Miguel Hidalgo's chart, which has the black moon there and a repeat of the Sagittarius energy coming through very strong. So it's just to kind of give a visual of that combination there.
Wow, no, it's kind of like a synastry chart, right? So we're looking at his birthday, and then when the asteroid that's then named after him 3 years later was discovered. So very, very interesting. And again, this makes me feel that the being that's manifested as Miguel Hidalgo is a very, very powerful avatar who knew all of this and was able to point using energy channels through people to this asteroid that then has his energy infused into it so that we can understand it in this moment. Okay. Incredible quantum technology being shared with us in this moment, I think.
So here's the other chart I have also.
Yes.
Do we want to look at this one?
Yeah, there's a lot of charts. We've got another one to go to, but this is important because this is when you could say, I mean, some people might say when the Constitution was laid down, but this is the first.
No, the Declaration of Independence.
The Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, they did a constitution later too, but this is the Declaration. This is declaring freedom.
So this day actually relates to the day when he woke up and he rang the bells of his church in the town of Dolores, where he lived and was the local priest, thus giving rise to the phrase, the cry of Dolores. And the cry of Dolores was for independence from the Spanish Empire. And
yeah,
so
Dolores is sorrow. So it was the sorrow of the people. It's calling forth. You know, that would have been also something to do with the Virgin of Guadalupe. Too, you know, that Black Madonnas have a very special, intimate connection with the people.
Right. And so September the 16th, 1810 is when this first movement is initiated. And, you know, I'd like to suggest also that being a man very connected to the indigenous tribes of Mexico at that time, one suspects that he probably had a very good understanding of their spirituality and probably how they worked with plants and medicine. So I feel that this was a man who used plant medicine to cross the divides of the 3, 4, and 5D. This is a land of incredible journeying medicine, peyote medicine, cactus medicine, many different types of medicines that can actually allow you to expand your consciousness. And for sure, a very large percentage of Hidalgo's army was made up of indigenous people that heard the cry of Dolores. Again, you know, the shaman leading the charge, probably with many other indigenous medicine men and women assisting him from the astral space. So this was a guy who had everything stacked on his side, or at least as much as he could get. So very interesting. So tell us a little bit about what you see here that you think.
Well, here we've got that Scorpio Taurus. The moon is in Taurus. It's just like not quite sure when, in you know what degree, but nevertheless, there it is. And it's opposite Uranus, Venus conjunction. People were so ready for this, you know, their hearts were in it. Their hearts were in it. And it was like an all or nothing thing, as Scorpio is. And, you know, one of the moon in Taurus, you know, just what you were saying, one of the things he helped teach the people had to do with cultivation and making bricks. It gave them, you know, power to, you know, grow their own food, which they knew about, of course, but who knows how many people were displaced. And so anyway, and then we've got the Hidalgo itself at 1 degree Aries, and we had a new moon there on the 21st of March. We have this key like 0 point placement there, and the Chiron, I don't mean Chiron, I mean the Centaur object, Hidalgo, which finally got reclassified, is on that point on the south node. So the nodes here, now these nodes are going to be coming back around as we move further into this new year. And I think it's next year, and maybe even, you know, I think next year it's going to be on these points and another nodal reversal. So I think this is revealing to me, you know, the power of the reversed, you know, nodes on your nodes. This is like a part of the karmic cycle and a turning point in it. So,
sorry, say that last sentence again, Kelley. You just dropped there slightly. Just repeat what you just said.
Okay, I was talking about the nodal reversals and how potent they are, because they're halfway through a nodal cycle that is a turning point in the karmic unfoldment of that.
Okay. Alrighty. So we've got Hidalgo, the now at this well, as unknown to the people at that time, but we know about it, obviously, positioned at 1 degree of Aries, which I think is interesting. Again, we've had so much Aries energy and this sense of new beginnings, this sense of new me. Who am I? Am I what I thought I was before? No, I'm no longer a person who's identifying through my wounds. I'm identifying as a sovereign being. This is the big shift, you know, and this came up during the recent natal immersion that we did. The big question for many of us is, if I don't identify as my pain and my wounds, what am I identifying with? To my surprise, when I really went into that meditation, I was like, oh my gosh, like a lot of my life has been that identity. And if I remove that, what space does that free up? Well, as it turns out, a lot. And I think that this is something really important for humanity, is that we have the opportunity to dream ourselves again, but from a higher perspective. Right?
Yeah. Well, look at the sun here opposite Pluto. Now, Pluto takes position in Pisces here. And, you know, it says more or less in opposition. But this, we have a little bit of dashes of Sagittarius in here with Neptune, Saturn. This is like manifesting the dream. This is like dreaming and bringing it into, and it might take a while, you know, but this is that dream with Jupiter looking right over there and saying, go for it. And that it also has repercussions on a lot of levels, I think. So again, we don't want to take this time too seriously. We don't know that it's Sagittarius rising, but if this is, you know, the moment, then the black moon, you know, would be activating that from the last chart we looked at. Anyway, too much information. Let's just say that we've got some this Scorpio Taurus polarity activated again in a very powerful way. That was part of his moment of destiny and the time to be moving on it.
Exactly. So I think that was an important little detail to bring in, because I feel like he's giving the energy of this moment that we're in now. This is the major point of why we're doing this piece, is that this is a big loop. And it turns out Hidalgo is one of the avatars or beings or asteroids or centaurs that is able to show us through the astrology a moment in time where all of this astrology was all playing out the same way that it is now, so that we can get the understanding of how to work with this energy and finish the story. This is what Hidalgo is asking of us right now, is to finish the story of sovereignty that was almost grasped in that time, but then actually ended up in the division, the separation of land that had been with the Davyd spirit of Mexico that is now actually in the US. And so they cut the head of the masculine when they put the borders down between the US and Mexico, and has created all of the problems that we know that are running along the border, to do with immigration, to do with smuggling, to do with the gangsters, all of that stuff. That's what happens when you muck around with earth lines, and that was done deliberately. And as a consequence, we can see in Mexico that the masculine has become incredibly, well, unmasculine, shall we say, and is certainly not operating in a sacred way. So this is the reversion of the inversion of the masculine here in Mexico, and probably the US and the rest of the world too. This is where we're at now. And the fact that Hidalgo himself was under the banner of the goddess, I think is just a beautiful sign for us all as the masculine or carrying masculine energy, to understand that there can be balance, and there needs to be balance. And he almost had it. He almost had it, but he was relying on too many gringos north of the border who let him down. But that's a story at the end. So let's have a look at 1923 to see what happens when this asteroid, Centaur, is given its actual name, because this is also a fascinating story.
Can you see it?
Only the very top bar for some reason. We were having problems with this before we came on.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to redo it.
Okay.
And the thing we want to look at right now.
So this is a very interesting loops and things kind of a timeline piece that we're doing. And so even we're struggling, because time has become very fluid, and trying to pin stuff down in this present moment is very difficult. And we're trying to do it through charts.
It's kind of a last minute thing. You know, we did a lot of like study and get things together. And I've had storms going through today. So yeah. So look at this chart. This is now, why are we looking at this chart, Davyd?
This chart is the day that we understand that the Centaur asteroid is given its actual name. And so this comes about by an interesting process by which a number of German scientists come to Mexico, as we understand, for an eclipse. We're not exactly sure. Well, the eclipse that they came for was in fact the September the 10th, 1923. So this is what we've pulled up as the moment that they have an audience with the then president of Mexico and ask for permission that this asteroid that was discovered, I guess, by their colleague Walter 3 years previously, is given the name Hidalgo. So this is the birth chart of the asteroid of Hidalgo, correct?
The naming of it. The
The naming of it.
We already
the naming
had
of
the birth
it.
chart.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So
Christening even. We can.
but this is part of the story, because this is the naming, and that team of German scientists came over and asked permission of the president of the company to name it this. So I think that is very meaningful, you know, because astronomers aren't asking for permission anymore. You know, they did not ask permission to name the Kuiper Belt objects by the people from whom that deity arose.
I've heard there's been some little tensions around some of them from some of the indigenous groups that hadn't had permission asked. So maybe this is also an important aspect of the energy of Hidalgo, the asteroid, which is about moral compass, which we'll come to a bit in our final wrap up with some notes. So I feel again that he inspires people to want to respect. Hey, we want to name something after you, but it feels appropriate to ask the current Mexican president at that time if it's appropriate, which as it turns out absolutely was, as we've already realized. So I love the fact that even within that, there's a certain level of respect through moral compass, right?
Yes, and total solar eclipse. So no wonder they went over there and took the opportunity. I wonder what made them think of that. Maybe because this eclipse was coming up, maybe because they had planned for it already, maybe because they've looked into the history of Mexico and they heard about Hidalgo and thought he was like quite, yes, the father of Mexico. So here we are, this solar eclipse with Venus exactly in alignment. So this is also a Venus star point, where Venus is on the far side of the sun, conjuncting the solar eclipse. So that is pretty profound, you know, that it's the goddess of the heart, you know, the goddess in Virgo. Now we saw in those last charts some Virgo energy that is coming through here as well. But I just think this total eclipse at 17 plus of Virgo is very profound, that Venus is there. And if Venus were in front of the sun, it would be retrograde. That's the other Venus star point that can happen, but this one is not retrograde. So it's on the other side of the sun, and it's bringing in the goddess energy to the earth, to, you know, in nature. It's really working with nature. And Mars is in Virgo as well. So this is also a beautiful chart. And look at the conjunction of Chiron with the true black moon at 2021 Aries.
Wow.
That's very close to where the eclipse was that we just had, that was at 29, you know, but nevertheless, Chiron now conjunct the black moon. This is also saying, you know, Black Madonna energy. This is also the healing of the mystery of the feminine. This is very, very profound. And we still have, because we looked at the 1920 chart, we still have Uranus in Pisces, and it's conjunct the South Node. Now we're about to have a May 5th eclipse when Uranus is conjunct the sun on the North Node. So this is a Uranus eclipse too. So this is a very profound eclipse. Yeah, beautiful. Also has all the water energy, Jupiter in Scorpio, had to have something in Scorpio, Pluto in Cancer, homeland energy, and this eclipse conjunct Uranus and Pisces, the South Node.
Right,
and
we've
also
also got
drawing from the past. This is drawing from the past.
exactly, and we've got Ceres at 0 degrees of Aquarius, right?
Yes, yeah. So she's again part of the picture here, and Pallas Athena is not obviously quite as involved, but of the people, for the people, and this is where Pluto is now, right? But again, you know, if we're looking back at those Hidalgo's chart, who has Uranus and Pisces, the South Node brings back from the past. So this is a perfect opportunity for him to come through, you know, have this object name for him and have a way to communicate, you know? Yeah.
And again, he's looping through again. And I think that the theme that we've been talking about throughout all of this over the last few years is the North Node in Taurus, the grassroots up. It's from the people for the people, you know, as opposed to the wrecking ball that Pluto has just taken through Capricorn over the last few years and showing us that when we have top down, it doesn't work. And I think that Hidalgo was a man who was inspired by the understanding of that, of his love of the goddess, his love of the land, his love of the people, and wanting to see the best for everybody. And I think that what better motif are we looking at in this moment? This is what we're calling for, right? The revival, the reemergence, the reversion of the feminine energy back to its rightful status from the last several thousand years, which was all necessary. And I think that this is the important part that's coming through in all of this, that as non-dual beings, there is no judgment placed on anything. It was all a big simulation experiment that we're still in, that we all signed up to, so that we could learn something and evolve in this moment into a place that we've never been before, which is a fully embodied, multidimensional, homoluminescent human being, which is super exciting. But we're getting assistance from the past, which isn't really the past. It's in the present, so it's active right now. This being is reaching out to us across time and space. So is he really in the past, or is he actually just talking to us from a different reality that is what we might call the fifth dimension?
Chiron return is happening. You know, this Chiron return, this is 100 years later, 2 50-year Chiron cycles. But I want to reemphasize that Hidalgo is actually the first discovered centaur object.
Right. And what's really interesting,
so they have a real connection, but their orbits are different. Many of even Chariklo, her orbit does not come closer than Saturn. So they're different, like bandwidths of the solar system objects that the centaurs connect up. So they connect different levels of consciousness. And this one, Hidalgo, is the asteroids, which are, you know, between Mars and Jupiter. So this comes really close. And then it goes out to Saturn. And so that's I haven't thought that through too much, but, you know, you can use a lot of variety of those asteroids to kind of pull in. And he seems to like Pallas Athena and Ceres a whole lot. And Ceres is the dwarf planet that is the largest object in the asteroid belt. I think of her as a shepherdess. Even her symbol looks like a shepherd's crook.
right?
And she's the shepherdess of all of the sheep in the asteroid belt. And so no wonder she communes with the centaur Hidalgo.
So without putting you too much on the spot, how many other centaurs are there that have been asteroid beings, or I mean, are there hundreds like the KBOs, or is there a handful? I mean,
I don't really know. They're not hundreds. You know, there's Chiron, there's Chariklo, there's Pholus and Nessus, and, you know, some that Melanie Reinhardt has worked with quite a bit. She would probably be the best source to ask. And also Zane Stein, who was right in early on in the Chiron research. And that's where I got the ephemeris of Hidalgo from his website. And he has a wonderful article on it as well, where we pulled from for this video. So I want to mention zanestein.com. And he has some good info on that. So
yeah, definitely. Thank you, Zane, for that. And he did the research back. He did it nearly 30 years ago, that article, from what I understand. So he was definitely ahead of the curve. And maybe this is what we're understanding now with the KBOs and these other objects that, you know, that we've been talking about, and Pam's also been talking about with yourself and with me and other various shows, is that we've been given these possibilities now to communicate, but there's so few details that we're having to learn how to receive the information about what these astrological objects actually represent. And I feel that maybe now we're able to connect with the intelligence that is somehow the one that they were named after, whether it's the intelligence of Hidalgo, whether it's the intelligence of Manwë, which seemingly is a figure from a story but actually is not at all. It's a representation of an avatar that Tolkien had already connected to and was able to bring down. So we're actually connecting with avatar intelligence. That's what's going on. And so we can do this with all KBOs. We can do it with all planets, in fact, but the KBOs, I feel, have a more personalized energy to them that makes them seem more like an individual who's not so different to us. Certainly Hidalgo definitely has that quality, right?
Yeah, but Hidalgo is not a KBO, but the KBO,
No.
interesting that you're saying personal, because I do think that if you have whatever KBOs you have, you know, they are your entry into the quantum realm. And
Right.
that, you know, otherwise, I think they're rather impersonal, considering that they have orbits longer than Pluto,
Right,
or
exactly.
being the first one. But that, and yes, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, 1920 first discovered Hidalgo Centaur, and in 1930 first discovered KBO that wasn't called a KBO at that point, being Pluto. So yeah, there's a resonance there. And I love that Hidalgo engages the asteroids, because they can be very personal connections too. There's most likely an asteroid named your name. So
you know what? If I've decided that from the future, there probably is one already. I just haven't remembered to discover it yet, right? We can have a lot of fun with this, everybody. Once we understand how the game is being played, we realize that we're actually in charge. And what I'm getting from what you just said is that the centaur objects, so I'm going to focus on this one with Hidalgo, are a bridge between the old world astrology and the new one, which we've got through the KBOs, which, as you said, are more sort of impersonal in some ways, but actually need a personal energy.
True. That is true. They're not in the KBO orbit,
No.
you know, in the KBO belt. No, but they, you know, that's how I got to the KBOs, by Caraclo. She, you know, she was the one that led me there. And she goes out really close to Neptune. She's one of the centaurs that goes the farthest out. And I'm not sure if it's Pholus or Nessus. One of those also goes, one of them heads out really toward Pluto. One of them gets way out there. And they all have these really elliptical orbits. And so, you know, and that's
also Sedna is another planet with a huge elliptical orbit, right? And that's a whole other category by itself.
Yeah, and it's coming closer to us. But Davyd, you had looked up where Hidalgo 944 Hidalgo is now, like in the eclipse we just had.
Yeah, so as we sort of wind our way to our sort of rambling journey with this time-traveling avatar known as Hidalgo, the man and the 944 Centaur asteroid.
And the importance of it in these times, with the independence of Mexico being accelerated, as is the freedom of the US as well, and they are connected. Yeah,
absolutely. Many people, myself included, believe that Mexico is actually going to be one of the center points from which New Earth is going to manifest, because of the work that people like Hidalgo already did. It's infused into the land. This is a land that is rich. The Davyd spirit here is very, very powerful. And she has created a land that is filled with spirituality. I believe that we've only got maybe 10% of the sacred sites visible to us that this land has to offer, which I think is very, very exciting. This is a land of medicines. It's a land of the goddess energy of Mother Earth. And so I love the fact that this priest, this masculine figure, embodying really in many ways the energies of Chiron, was doing it under the banner of the goddess. You know, as far as I know, he didn't have any children. I'm not sure if he was married. I haven't found any evidence of that as a priest. So he was a male warrior, but doing something for the divine feminine, which I think is really, really cool at this time. And so I just want to share, first of all, that Hidalgo currently is at 25 degrees of Scorpio. So this is how we can start to see how it may be working in your own individual personal charts. And you can go to astro.com, the wonderful website, and you can program in the advanced charts 944, and it will pull up your astro chart with Hidalgo added in. And you can do this with anything that we've been talking about. Wonderful, wonderful resource that I use a lot. So just want to give a shout out to those guys. For me personally, what's interesting is that in my own natal chart, I have Hidalgo at 25 degrees of Aries, and I have the other centaur, Chiron, at 29. So they're actually conjuncting in my own chart, which actually makes a lot of sense to me about so many things and why I felt inspired to do this piece with you in the first place. Because in many ways, I feel like Hidalgo is my great-great uncle or something with his energy, very, very much resonates with me. And so I just maybe we can take the chart down there, Kelley, and I just want to share a few notes about how we can understand the energy of Hidalgo when reading our chart. So how would you like to summarize his energy?
Asterisk is, maybe you want to link the astro.com website down under here so people can go and then put in that 944 in the extended selection section when you can bring up a chart. That's
very easy. Just go to the astro.com, like Kelley's just said, extended selection, and just type in the box 944. Very easy. You can do it alphabetically, but you'll be looking through that list quite a long time, as I tried to do. Very interesting. If you were to put everything in that resource into your chart, you'd have a very, very busy chart, as I tried once to do, and I nearly had a meltdown. So I would like you, Kelley, to, in your own words, sum up what we've experienced today here as to how we can understand the energy of this Centaur asteroid Hidalgo in our charts. What's its influence and how can we read it? That's what I think would be really useful.
If we're drawing on this discovery date and the myth or the story behind the name, we do have some very powerful energy to alter our experience, I think. You know, we want to definitely use that warrior priest expression given from the sorry, I'm a little distracted trying to bring up a chart to just be able to, for myself, to make this summary. Yes, that Scorpio, the intensity, the transformational capacity, who he was, what he took on, and that it is a freedom fighter, you know, kind of, and it's strongest and farthest away in Scorpio and where it is now, and then in Sagittarius. So for the next, I think I'm just making a guess, 4-ish years, it's going to be in those two signs. And then it's going to come in. And when it comes in and just gallops apace through the signs, a lot can happen after that too. And I think that's an interesting thing, that the rhythm of the timing of Hidalgo can be slower and then really speed up. I think that's very interesting, but it emphasizes the Scorpio Sagittarius, which we saw play through all of these charts.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it's just giving me some extra thoughts to my own notes here. And so what I understand, first of all, that this also represents eccentricity on one level. It's got a very eccentric orbit. It also shows us that time is not necessarily a balanced day by day, second by second experience, as Dandelion has been showing us as long as I've been talking about him over the last few years. You know, we've got this process where it speeds up and it slows down. Again, it's a little bit like our friend Black Moon Lilith. She does something similar, right? And so these beings, these energies are showing us that time is not fixed second by second thing. It's just an unfolding experience. It can seem fast or it can seem slow, depending on how much your attention is on it. So I think that's really interesting. I think that the energy that's really come to me of Hidalgo is breaking down the concepts of time and space and being able to communicate or even time travel. I feel like I've been time traveling with this guy over the last 2 weeks. And have I moved anywhere from this seat? Not really. Hardly gone anywhere, to be honest, but it's all been going on. So was it going on or not? I think this is a part of the quantum intelligence that Hidalgo is trying to introduce us to, is think outside the box. Do not be bound by time and space as a linear concept, because it's not real at all. So there's that much more esoteric quantum aspect. But Hidalgo, the man, I think, gives us the ability to be assertive, to stand up for ourselves, to stand up for others, and to stand up for what we believe in, and to stand up for it so strongly that he's willing to die for the cause. He's willing to give it everything, because he's under the protection of high beings like Archangel Michael and the goddess. And because he was already, I think, pretty realized, he knew that his mission was going to come to its fruition. So he gets to see his own rebellion come to its full fruition, not because of independence from Mexico, but independence for everybody. And so he's getting to see it from the higher dimensions through us. So we're time traveling. He's time traveling into the future to communicate with us and others who give him attention from the past, so that we can finish the job for him in this moment and bring a new earth sovereignty to everybody.
What a moment to choose to through this eclipse. That's a hybrid eclipse, and all of the centaurs are hybrid. That's why they're centaur category, centaur being half horse, half human. But you know, Chiron, we think of the teacher healer, but this is the warrior priest. So this is a different expression of potential, what we could call hybrid, but it's a melding of different aspects. Yeah.
And I think the fact that we've just had this very, very powerful hybrid eclipse, and also even the idea of hybrid, what is humans? Maybe we are going to start to understand that we're all hybrid beings with our 12 strands of DNA, which, as it turns out, apparently are mostly extraterrestrial. Wow, who would have thought that? So, you know, what are we? Who are we? I think those are the questions that are really, really important right now. And we shouldn't be afraid of asking ourselves, and maybe even understanding, oh my gosh, what is a human? When did humans appear? We've been told a whole load of big BS, as we know, and that, you know, adaptations have been made, maybe in the not so distant past, so that we can be in this moment ready to become the rainbow tribe of our ancestors who are actually off-planet beings that we agreed to do a journey with. Who knows? You know, so I think the most important thing is that we understand that we are much more than this, and that time is not how we understand it. And really everything around us is really just a result of where collective or personal intention has created a reality that we can all share together. And how that looks is really up to all of us. That's the beautiful thing. We all get to decide, how does it look? That, I believe, is really what the Pluto moving into Aquarius is about, and Saturn moving into Pisces, is how do we find the structure within the fluidity of time and space.
Yeah, lovely. Every time you said humans, I was thinking you said Schumann's. Yes, human resonance really is coming in pretty strong peaks with the Earth. So there's that is part of our experience right now, these like huge downloads of light. And here we are, you know, kind of lightning rods, you know, bringing it down and through as well as we can, and being open to letting ourselves receive, you know, that light.
Exactly. And I think that also underneath all of this, the energies of fire and water are really important. The spark or the fire is what allows the Scorpio to rise from the scorpion to the phoenix to the eagle. You know, we're also in a moment where the eagle condor prophecy is coming to pass now, when the energies of South America and North America. So again, we've got this Scorpio energy. The eagle's perch is the ascended Scorpio who's been through the death and rebirth process. So you always need these death and rebirth characters, these scorpionic beings, to come and break down and transform, because unless we break down the crap, the silt, the sludge, the junk and gunk from the past, we're stuck in that space of the dirt. We need to break down, transform the energy, not necessarily just get rid of it, but take it from an inverted space to a reverted space, so we can recycle it and use it for ourselves, for our own well-being. And once we understand all of those unhelpful energies that were keeping us in a place of sickness or illness can actually be used for our own health, we're going to kick on so fast. And I think that that's where we're at right now. We're at this really exciting moment. And even with the energy of the Mayan wave spell that's kicking in yesterday, the Mayan, the magnetic storm, the storm is upon us. We mustn't be afraid of it. We just have to make sure that our ark, our boat is nice and secure, our cupboards are nice and stocked. And you know what? New Earth is here. We just have to make the short transitional journey as a collective over the next few weeks. And for those of us who are ready to step onto the shores of not the new world, but the new Earth, can dare to finish the job that many people before us so valiantly attempted and came close and have now imbued in us to do the job for them.
Yeah, we're in this eclipse zone where we've got that May 5th eclipse coming up that's going to reverberate in a similar way to the one we just had, to the one on September 20, what was it? September
1923. Right?
1923. Yeah. So eclipses can do that. They can vibe in with each other through long time. Yeah. Okay.
What we're really understanding is that eclipses are wormholes or portals in space which we can travel through, and you know it's coincidental that this magnetic wave spell, the storm, the magnetic storm in the Mayan calendar, finishes on the full moon in Scorpio eclipse, which is a full moon illumination of the South Node in Scorpio, the final revealing of everything that has gone on that is not of the higher vibrations. And those of you who've been following the game over the last few years should know what we're talking about by now. And if you don't, well, then maybe you want to check out a few other alternative news sources to the ones you've been watching, because it's all happening and it has to collapse and it has to unfold downwards so that the new earth can spring from the grassroots up. But if we're storing a load of sewage on the ground, then that's not going to be any good. But we can use that material as fertilizer, so that we can use the silt of the old paradigm as fertilizer for our new earth, and so that we can start afresh, ground up in co-creation with Mother Earth and the Goddess. I think it's so beautiful.
I think everybody is having experiences of how dysfunctional the system is at this point.
Yeah, I would say so.
Have to wake up and more to come. But yeah, glad to be in this moment with you, Davyd, and with you all out there. So thanks for joining us on this special edition.
This special edition we are tentatively naming as Avatars and Asteroids, or Asteroids and Avatars. So we're not sure when the next one, if there'll ever be one, will come out. I'm sure there will be. So it's not going to be a regular show like Moons and Mythos, which will be returning again next month, and has already had many, many views. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Really appreciating the comments that you're all putting on that show. I know that we both have a lot of fun when we do that show. So there probably will be more of these, but we're going to do them intuitively as they come to us and as they speak to us, because this is all about being very dandelion right now, which is being in the present moment and enjoying it to its unending maximum degree. So on the final note I just want to share is the Sabian symbol for the 22nd degree of Aries, which is where the Cazimi happened, I think last week, right? The Jupiter Cazimi was at 22 degrees. So I'm just going to read that. So bear with me, everyone, because I have to find it here. So the Sabian symbol at the 22nd degree of Aries is the gate to the garden of desire. And I'm just going to, or the gate to the garden of all fulfilled desires, as Roger called it. So just a little commentary on this. Abundance arising as a result of trust. Optimism, synergy, sharing, and abundance as life principles. Contrasting the fighter's harsh, lonely path, a softer way is open to those who share rather than compete. The benefits of synergy are then highly significant, and the promise of great abundance is fulfilled. A further benefit is achieved, the development of an attitude of optimism and expectation of success. So I feel that that really is the motif for the energy of Hidalgo and his journey as a warrior, understanding it doesn't always have to be that way, but through the work of himself and many others, we can now reap the rewards in a much more genteel way that doesn't need us to fight. We just have to be in it together and to share collectively. So on that beautiful note, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Kelley, as always. Kelley, please do share your website in case anyone has never seen our show before, so they can learn more about your work.
Helia Star, www.helia, star.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And for those who are interested in working with plants and understanding how we get to be in these moments and understand what's going on, definitely check out quantumplanthealing.com. And if you're not already working with our good old friend Dandelion, I would suggest now is a great time, because it's all about this moment. Everybody, thank you for joining us. We'll see you all again very soon. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.